Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. This is a special podcast episode, being the 100th episode, which is, to me, quite a milestone. It's a lot of hours spent behind the microphone and editing. But more importantly, we've had some very unique and wonderful guests on Harvest Your Own. Everything from stories about people getting into hunting to how to handle meat, conservation issues, some history. It's been very diverse. The most downloaded episode, though, was called Wild Game Ramblings, and it was 2 guys that I brought together to discuss whether wild game should be hung or not before butchering and whether it made any difference. We never really tackled that topic, but it was a fun episode.
We talked about pellicles.
Yes, it was a fun episode, lots of fun. We never really addressed what we were supposed to, but apparently our audience loves it. So special for the 100th episode, we have Mr. Lee Foote and Mr. Matt Besko back in studio. Welcome, gents.
Thank you. Good to be here, Brett.
Great to be here one more time.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I forget who it was. They said, did you ever see that episode of The Muppets where those old guys are in the balcony of Stadler and Waldorf?
Yes.
I said, yeah, well, Besko and Foote, give them a few more years and they might fit that just perfectly.
Yeah, that was 6 months ago. Those years are here.
Anyways, because you guys know each other so well, I don't know how many decades you've been friends, but I would like you to introduce each other.
Absolutely. I would like to introduce my friend, Dr. Lee Foote, Dr. August Lee Foote. And young August was born in, I won't age him, but all I will say is that he is approaching the magic year of the numeral that is kind of cheeky, 69. And he is from Alexandria, Louisiana. He grew up in a family of 6 boys and 1 girl. Correct, Lee?
Correct.
And Lee's dad was a judge. Lee's mom was exceptionally well-read. Lee was raised in a very unique, eclectic, and progressive family. Lee became a forester and a wildlife biologist, attaining his PhD from the University of Utah.
Utah State
University. And came here with his lovely, more intelligent, far better looking, far more dynamic wife, Naomi, who's absolutely stunning, way better than Lee. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Lee and becoming his friend. And we've enjoyed many, many, many spectacular hunting trips.
Okay, and
travel across the world.
You're making me blush
wonderful.
now.
Yes, and he looks terrible naked. That's all I can say. I will end it with that.
Okay.
Horrible naked.
Well, thank you. I'm glad
these fleshy
I'm glad you're not attracted. I'm really glad you're not attracted. Well, let me introduce my dear friend, Matt Besko. I call him the Polish porcine death angel. He and I have hunted around the world. I've been to Poland. I can't give his entire life history, but I will tell you he is Homo sapiens, contrary to popular belief. He speaks fluent Polish. We might get a little bit of that out of him, which I love. He's a master cook. He cooks like the old world. He's like continental treat. He makes wonderful soups, stews, just spectacular bigos, and we haven't mastered Jurek yet, but we're on it. He is married to my Edmonton wife, Lucia, and she and I have regular coffee dates. I worry that your wife's been cheating on us again, though, Matt, because she's making coffee for other men now.
I know, it's horrible.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, we've hunted southern Alberta, northern Alberta. We've missed a lot of ducks and geese together, and had a lot of fun. And one of the beauties of this is that both of us have killed enough things in our lives that it's the joy of the hunt, and it's the time together, it's the storytelling, and it's the ribbon that's probably as important as the actual meat procurement at this point. But wonderful guy. I can't think of a more sincere. He's an armchair philosopher. There is at least one book in him, if we can ever convince him to get out of the government work and get into his own rut. Good writer, good humorist, and overly fast motorcyclist. He's wrecked 2 of my motorcycles already.
Don't laugh, it's true.
Yep.
Anyway, great companion.
Yes, I can see that you two get along very well, even though on the surface it looks like you're more like porcupines.
I have a story about Lee and a porcupine. I'll tell it later.
He just called you a prick. You know that.
Yeah. Not the first time.
100th episode. Looking back, we've had some great episodes. Both of you have been on several.
Yeah.
You know, Matt, you've been here. We learned all about Bigos, the history of cooking wild game, some Polish
Chronic wasting disease.
Yes, chronic wasting disease, things like that. Lee, you've been on with the Zimmerlings before.
Yeah.
You've been on with Matt before.
It's a privilege. It's a gift you give us to be able to talk to the hunting public and hear back from them. You become the facilitator, and I really appreciate this podcast.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I think it's great information. We have a significant amount of downloads, which means people are listening, which is why we've got to 100 episodes.
Yeah.
And, we'll keep it diverse and try to keep the hunting public of Alberta and beyond educated, informed, and entertained, because I think it goes well together.
I think that's one of the really nice things about this podcast is that it's Alberta based and it's very broad in the number of topics and the diversity of topics that you address. And these are topics that hunters are interested in, and they want to be able to learn the skills. They want the stories. They want to immerse themselves in whatever you're doing, Brad, and whoever you have on. And that's really valuable, because Alberta is a very rich province with respect to its hunting heritage. And the hunting culture in Alberta runs long, deep, wide, and people are very passionate about it.
I will add one thing to that we both take pointed jabs sometimes at people that get too serious and too precious about this. It is a deep passion, but it's not all church time serious stuff. There's a lot of room for humor and fun and joy and frivolity, and it's our escape from work. It's our antidote to work. It's living life fully and letting the uncertainty wash over you and engaging, and it gets you into that flow experience where you're sword fighting with opportunity, and it's just so much fun. So keeping the fun in hunting is really important. And when I see some of the very serious ads, which are very much in vogue right now, to the rugged individual with the stark wilderness trekker and stuff, I'm thinking, oh boy, what about me with the broken down quad floating in the creek? You know,
What would you call your book? Is it Keep the Dopamine in Hunting, or How to Get Dopamine from Hunting?
Well, you just shorten it to dope.
I think I'd just keep the mine.
You know, it's interesting that you brought up how important this is to Albertans and our hunting heritage, but people wanting more information. Some of the most sought after information and episodes that we had up were with Linda Zimmerling on access. So there are real issues out there that people face. Maybe it's that they don't have the courage to go knock on somebody's door. I know I've been with people before and they just start shaking with anxiety, like, oh my God, I got to talk to a stranger.
Absolutely.
So there are stumbling blocks for certain people out there, and we were trying to address those.
That's a really good point. You know this, but you've got the secret weapon of all secret weapons. When my daughter was 7 years old, cute little blonde girl, she would go to the door with me to talk to farmers, and more often than not, at 5:30 in the morning, they want us to come in and sit down, have coffee, and talk, and they give us permission, and they fawn over her, and before long, we have permission for the whole season to hunt on this land. She was like my secret key into landowner access.
Yeah, and then his daughters grew up, and now he has access to even more land.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. My wife can get access too where I can't. So sometimes looks and personality do go a long ways.
Yeah.
I think hunters in Alberta, when I speak to a lot of hunters, everyone tends to be a self-professed expert or a biologist and wants to be able to speak about their hunting experience. And it's not like they're being arrogant or anything like this, but they're willing to share the information that they have. Wrong or right doesn't really matter. They're very excited to speak about it. And you could always get around to talking about the actual issue and things that they want to learn about, and they will listen. And quickly, the expert will disappear and you'll have a student. And I think those are the people that likely listen to your podcast.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that those people that believe they're experts and pay attention to things in the outdoors, it's their passion coming out.
Yep.
That's really what it is.
You don't want to run that down. I mean, I like to say I've got 15 years of education on advanced wildlife ecology, and I'm not nearly as good a hunter, as knowledgeable of whitetails in this parkland country as the bus drivers and the oil rig workers that are running these roads and know these animals intimately. Knowledge is not necessarily the end-all, be-all of being an effective outdoorsman and engagement with wildlife or knowing patterns. If you're a good observer, you can be a primal, exceptional game harvester. It's not about college degrees or anything.
No.
Now, if you're managing populations over a decade-long period with a lot of levers that are darn near invisible, yeah, you better have some computer modeling and some background population dynamics theory and some examples from the literature. You better justify your decisions because you're dealing with the ephemeral out there that none of us is capable of predicting the future. We don't have a crystal ball. What we have is best evidence from the past that we carry forward, and it's not individual anecdotes. It's a collection of wisdom. So basically what Matt's doing is managing existing information to make the most responsible predictions for where we should be. I love the Gretzky quote, you don't skate to the puck, you skate to where the puck is going to be. And that's the essence, that's the magic of wildlife management. You got to get out ahead into the unknown and set conditions of habitat, access, harvest right now. And then there's the unknown of weather predictions crashing in and chronic wasting disease. And it's a complex thing.
It's a complex thing, Lee, but the number of tools that we have in order to manipulate populations are not complex. Complexity we will reduce to populations are stable, populations are increasing, populations are decreasing. The reason why they're doing those things are complex, but the tools that we have as hunters are relatively simple. It's basically assigning a season, assigning a quota, and going after a particular class of animal. That in itself is relatively simple, but the outputs are complex.
Matt,
and the uncertainty is complex.
Your ass is sucking pond water.
Oh, this is what he does all the time.
You have overstepped here. It's simple to you because you do it all the time. To the average Joe on the street that doesn't live in this world, it's not simple. You take 4 or 5 major variables and a lot of minor variables, and then you put a political layer on top of it, and you've got what I call a wicked problem. You don't just have the simple mechanical predict these things. You've got a very complex ball of wax, and it's dynamic. It's changing all the time. I think you're downplaying the expertise required to do what you do.
I don't think so. I think you're dead wrong, actually.
You just think you're a lot smarter than you are.
No, I'm a lot dumber than I think I am. And I mean, really, Lee, look at something like mule deer. Our mule deer populations are down significantly. The causal effects are numerous and varied. But regardless of what those effects are, there's basically one tool we have, and that is stop shooting mule deer.
That's one of the tools.
That's one of the
tools.
tools.
That's not the only tool.
No. However, what is the easiest tool? What is the tool that's in front of us? I can't go around spending billions of dollars to influence private landowners in order to improve habitat. I can't eliminate every predator on the landscape, but I can reduce quota.
Okay, that is not it. You can do an enlightened chronic wasting disease management program. You can inform.
What will that involve, Lee?
Well, it probably involves some localized depopulations. It'll involve an education campaign. It will involve managing your accessory populations of whitetails as well, whitetails and elk in association with mule deer. You can provide as much habitat as you can. There's a predator control angle. There are other things you're pulling.
But you're making it more complex. And the more complexity you add to a problem like this, you're basically scaffolding your assumptions. And as you scaffold your assumption, the error that is built into an assumption becomes exponential. So you can say those things and they're all great, but when push comes to shove, the easiest, most obvious lever that's in front of you is to manage harvest. Now, after that, you can get together with communities and other biologists and landowners and indigenous people and CWD researchers, and you can do that. But that is a very long-term process, and the success around that is very, very difficult to predict.
I won't disagree with you on that. That is the biggest lever you have to pull. But how far do you pull that lever, and how do you decide how far to pull that lever? That's not a simple question, Besko.
You're making this way harder than it is. How am I going to justify my position?
Well, I'm trying to get you fired. That's what I'm trying to do.
I'm too dumb to do anything complex, Lee. You know this.
You got good people working for you, though.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
I mean, Fred Bunnell from UBC had a wonderful quote a number of years ago. He said, wildlife biology and management isn't rocket science. It's way more complex than that.
Yeah.
And, you know, with rocket science, things like that, you can measure burn rates and fuel. You can measure gravity. You can measure the strength and the tensile strength in the heat that is required to send an aircraft into space. You can measure the tangents and the velocities and the return rate, and everything is measurable. With wildlife management and biology, the uncertainty, the risk, the catastrophic effects on the landscape are virtually impossible to predict. So that's where natural systems tend to have a complexity that's not only wicked, but absolutely dead frustrating. I think one of the key elements, if we want to back the conversation up, hunters, biologists, almost anyone, patience. Patience is absolutely key. And not only that, being able to be patient with the public who want changes now. Yeah. Because when they see changes that are taking place on the landscape, they know something's happening. And quite often, one of the best tools that you can have are let systems play out on their own. Because they will recover, they will change from one equilibrium to another, and you have to be patient.
I would like your listenership. I want the listenership to listen to this long disquisition that Matt has just laid out, and tell me, is it simple or is it not? You're dealing with all this massive uncertainty. You've got to know how far to pull this lever. You've got political pressures and you've got public demands, and you're saying it's simple.
Yeah, I identify quota. I assign a number to that quota and I apply it November 1st.
Okay. You know, and there'll be a lot of listeners out here that are cheering for one side of the table or the other, and there'll be some people very passionate about the mule deer topic because ultimately they want more deer on the landscape, as many as possible. They want lots of opportunity. Yeah. But then we have the unique audience of Harvest Your Own that we actually break things down to one step at a time to introduce them and get them started. And how's that fall into the management? We know lots of people want to shoot a big buck, but how do you deal with that person that just wants to harvest a deer, whether it's antlers or ears?
So this is the key. And Lee, I hate to concede to Lee, but I want it to be oppositional. This business
you do it well.
It can be complex. It certainly can be, especially when you have human beings involved, and human beings are integral into this process. And what you just spoke about, Brad, is a wildlife management objective. And the wildlife management objective, because we're not going to eliminate deer tomorrow. Deer are a really hard species to extirpate. You really have to hammer them if you want to actually get rid of them. So we're not going to get rid of deer. Deer are going to remain a secure species for many, many years. So what do we apply as a management regime? Lee here wants to shoot the biggest buck alive.
The fattest doe.
The fattest, biggest buck, whereas Brad wants to shoot several big, fat, juicy, delicious does. And he wants to do it every year. Yet Lee is more than willing to wait 5, 6, 7 years in order to shoot a very nice quality animal. And there's other objectives as well. Sometimes you may have a pathogen that's introduced to deer population, or there's too many vehicles that are hitting deer on the highway, or people are experiencing depredation issues on private lands. So the wildlife management objectives is let's reduce deer populations, whereas another objective may be recovery. So all of these are objectives, and the difficulty is managing for objectives that are contradictory.
The trade-offs, yeah.
The trade-offs, and you have to trade them off.
And you have to be adaptive, because you try. A lot of this is trial and error. You move in that direction. If it's working, you press on. If it's not, you've got to reconsider and do something different. We don't lock down on one strategy, period. You're very eloquent, Matt, about, and I hate to compliment you, but very eloquent on the rate and the time component, because our minds don't naturally go to thinking about rates. We think of absolute snapshot abundance. Big year this year, not so good last year. These are pearls on a string, if you will, the nodes of information we have. But really what you're looking at is the full necklace moving through time. And it's a hard thing. I love your trying to pull us back to cooking and eating. That was making my mouth water.
The best advice I heard about what do you need to do in order to shoot a trophy buck, like a big quality buck.
Yeah.
And an outfitter told me this. He said, well, don't shoot the small ones.
Yeah.
And that is simple yet absolutely the most wise advice.
Right.
And how often have we seen deer in the field and you're just going, oh my gosh, I need to get that one.
Yeah.
Or just go into the field with just a doe tag.
Or just a doe tag.
Then you'll find the big buck.
Yeah.
Well, I love the definition of trophy is a 120-pound doe raised near grain.
Yes.
That's its own sort of trophy. So what we've got is multiple competing objectives. Somebody, like you said, some want a big set of antlers, some want a succulent, easily accessible doe that they can drive their quad to.
And the complexity there is to decide which one of those to manage for, or how to make a trade-off.
Area-wide or simultaneous overlapping.
Or time.
Yeah, and you've got antlerless issues. So.
This all ties back to the talks we've had on CWD, and you were here with the Zemmerlings talking about mentoring. Wildlife management is much bigger than that. We've had some unique opportunities in Alberta where we've had new seasons. Sandhill cranes. Mm-hmm. When they came along, we did talks about how do you hunt them, how do you decoy them, how do you call them, all those things. So we've helped to broaden the perspective and opportunity base for hunters in Alberta. And more importantly, on Harvest Your Own, on the recipe side of it, we've given them recipes and information how to cook all of these things.
You've given them a new life,
whether it's
as food,
that big mule buck or a sandhill crane. And another huge thing that's happened with Harvest Your Own in the hunting community, at least I think it is waterfall warm-up and different things where we've been able to serve people some wild game and literally change opinion on species like snow geese, where people called them sky carp and all these derogatory names. Well, next thing you know, my phone's ringing in the fall. Hey, could you give me that goose leg recipe that you have? Or how did you make that ham out of that goose?
The pastrami recipe.
And, typically in wildlife, baiting animals in, except for bears, is illegal or considered unethical. And yet Fenson has baited us in here with the promise
with food
of a sandhill crane lunch. And I actually had 7 different types of snow goose yesterday, and they were all effing delicious.
After you berated the concept of
I was the guy that couldn't make them work.
Geese.
But it was how I was cooking them. I was cooking them just like they were speckle bellies.
Yeah, it's interesting because perspectives on wild game, there's people that absolutely cherish it, respect it, know how to cook it. And then there's other people that have, I'll be honest, we had some hunters here one night, a group, and I cooked elk and bear and deer and all kinds of stuff, and I had a really big backstrap that I did. And one of the people there were like, "Oh man, this is outstanding elk." And my wife said, "Well, that's not elk." He said, "Well, what is it?" And she said, "It's deer." He said, "No, it's not deer. We don't eat deer in our family. We turn it all into sausage. I would know if that's deer, but it was whitetail." And it's an eye opener. It's funny how is it something that we get locked in our brain that
yes.
Absolutely.
It's not edible. It's not good. It's only good for sausage. Snow geese stink. They, whatever it is.
The eyes feast before the mouth does, and I will say that I never let new hunters clean their own deer the first time, because they'll smell a little rumen fluid, or they'll see viscera that they don't normally see, and they will mentally poison themselves against this.
Oh, true.
And so when I clean deer, I typically will have it eviscerated and nicely cleaned inside, even washed out, and then we carefully pull nice, lean, cool pieces of meat off, shrink wrap them, and they cherish that. And so there's a bit of trickery there. They can get to the actual evisceration process later on, but the learning to love the meat for what it is, the symbolism of it, the stories that surround it at the table, just realizing that this is not $150 worth of elk loin or beef that I had to buy. I produced this, and the sense of pride, ownership, and in self-investment into your meal. It's going from sun to grass to meat to me or into my kids, and we're living out the life of this animal.
And it could take place overnight, or it could take place over several generations. I remember as a kid, there was very few people that really valued eating pike. Mm-hmm. They were jacks. They were slough sharks. They're, these dirty, stinky, fishy smelling fish, because you had them in the back of your 66 Oldsmobile for 7 hours in 32-degree weather. And, pike are a marvelous eating fish, as we all know. But, I mean, when the whole business of sandhill cranes came forward, and we tried to move sandhill cranes as a game species for years and years and years in Alberta. And there was a lot of reluctance, because people thought, well, what are you going to do with them? You can't eat those things. There's these bony, stringy...
They eat frogs and salamanders.
They eat frogs, and they have the darkest, reddest, livery meat, and it's inedible, and you shouldn't kill something unless you're going to eat it, and all of this. And many people, biologists included, experienced hunters, they poo-pooed the idea of sandhill cranes, and why would I kill one of those majestic species? And, now after a few years of having an open harvest, we don't get a single complaint with a sandhill crane season. I cannot recall.
And you have a drumstick like a Louisville Slugger. That's worth something.
Yeah, right off of Fred Flintstone.
Yes.
It's interesting, the talk you had about not allowing deer hunters the first time to eviscerate their deer. When I grew up, the one thing that I recall most about my dad when he went hunting, he'd come home with a couple ducks and a pheasant, some Hungarian partridge, maybe a rough grouse, and he'd always set up on the deep freeze to clean them. But the first thing he did is he'd set up that big metal fan and blow it across his nose while he was doing the birds, and we never smelt it.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah,
Smart.
Interesting. Little stories and little family traditions that make a difference down the road. And, that's what we talked about is wild game traditions, right?
And how it ties into your culture. And depending on, where your family came from and how you grew up, I mean, you see it in all sorts of cultures right now. I'm not going to eat that. That's, we don't eat that. And a culture will come along and, they'll introduce it. People will try it. And it's absolutely delicious. And then it becomes part of our culture.
Yeah, I invite people to stretch their abilities. We had a mutual friend here yesterday that absolutely refused to eat squirrel, for example, or liver. And I wonder how many times they have actually tasted liver or tasted squirrel. And
probably once or twice. That's been overcooked. And
maybe it's early exposure. But boy, trying things like tripe or menudo or these cultural things, spectacular. I would have trouble eating a raw sheep's eyeball, but by George, I would sure try it if it was put on my plate and said, eat it. Now,
hold on, Brad, you've heard it. We've all heard this. The next time we're here, we have to procure a fresh sheep's eyeball for Lee to eat. And even the sound alone will be enough to make small kids run in fear. It'll be like...
It depends where you are. When I was in the Arctic, the kids would eat the caribou eyes, and they called it ice cream, and they fought over them.
Yeah, see, there you go.
When in Rome. Again, there you go. Lee will wrestle you over a sheep's eyeball, and I will be here as a witness.
It should slide down pretty easily if you don't chew it. It might come out the other end,
I think it'll come out the same end.
It's funny because full utilization, it's something I strive for.
Me too.
I try to use all parts of of the animals we harvest. I save the hides, all kinds of things.
Bone broth.
But are people just not hungry enough these days? Are we too spoiled as a society?
Oh, we certainly are. We certainly are.
We don't appreciate anything other than the prime cuts.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I love the challenge of full utilization where you are. I mean, I joked yesterday, I don't eat brains, but my grandmother did, sheep brains or pig brains with her eggs every Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning. There's certain nerve in brains for various biological reasons I don't eat, but everything else is fair game. I have to watch the organ meats because the purines will affect me gout-wise, but it's all edible and it's delicious, and in small doses, heck yeah. And it's a learned cuisine. You practice this stuff and you broaden your horizons instead of narrowing, and it makes your whole life richer.
Yeah, and you know what? Even if you don't want to eat it, there's ways to convert it. Like take a liver, for instance. If you don't like liver, they make a great bait for trapping leeches for catching walleye.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
And also there are some parts that we can't eat that go to dog food for us. We have a Labrador Retriever that thrives on fat trimmings or bruised or gut shot stuff. I don't use lead bullets, so I don't worry about
chewing gum, paper.
Well, true that. Yeah, your dog eats that stuff too, along with you.
Yes. I a lot of chewing gum.
The different things that we eat off an animal and the way we manage wildlife, is that changing? Or is the
absolutely
demographics of hunters changing? Is the face of hunters also changing? Is that going to create challenges, or is it just going to broaden the hunting community?
Hunting has changed so much in the last 20, 25 years. The onset of social media has changed the perception, the action, the behavior of hunters. Programs like Meat Eater and the Food Network, and when that came on, all of a sudden people are eating game. The local food movement, the Omnivore's Dilemma.
This program.
This program. I mean, because of this, because of folks like you, Brad, that are creating masterful dishes from Sandhill Crane and exposing people to this and them tasting it and saying, oh my God, this is a wonderful, wonderful food. And then you watch programs on television where, Steve Ranella is collecting bear fat and using it for shortening. And we've heard about these stories that, the pioneers in Canada used to do in order to fend off starvation. And now it's becoming the norm. And you're seeing celebrities like the Hunter Chef, and people are really, really changing. Not only is the technology changed, but the access to information, hunter success has changed as a result. And people are learning hunting techniques. They're learning how to cook their food in all sorts of wonderful ways. And we're starting to see a very marked difference. I believe that hunters today are exposed and are informed much better on a number of different hunting issues, techniques, regulations than they ever were before.
It's interesting you bring that up, because my grandma probably had a pot and a cast iron frying pan, but Lee, you were talking about how much you use your Instant Pot pressure cooker.
Yeah.
We've talked about how you can integrate a sous vide into making anything that's tough, super tender and wonderful, or finished pastrami and spiced rum.
Yes.
Yeah. Our ability to cook things in different ways with different instruments, different tools, can make us look like superb chefs.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you say that, because historically, subsistence level cultures never turn their back on new technology, whether it was an atlatl or a bow or firearms, whatever. And hunters today, you don't have to go back to buckskins and black powder to have an aesthetic experience. A sous vide maker or a Instant Pot lets me do things with marrow extraction, bone broth that I couldn't do quickly. I could maybe do it over days of boiling, but it does it quickly, and it makes me do it.
And how's the flavor?
And the flavor's spectacular.
Right.
I tend to spice a little more in there with those high temperatures. But I think what Matt and you are referring to in some ways is getting the public, and us hunters especially, to increase the appreciation and gratitude for what we've got here, to really elevate that to hot cuisine. I'm sitting here in Brad's man cave looking at this beautiful cedar strip canoe and thinking, it wouldn't paddle necessarily any better than a graphite or a fiberglass canoe. Yet when you're in that canoe, you probably feel different. You probably get a little bit more of an aesthetic. Every paddle stroke means a little more. And the same is true for a venison tenderloin versus one you bought at Safeway.
Yeah.
You treat it with a little more respect. You have a little more gratitude, a little more appreciation for it. And so I think that's one of the gifts that these animals give us. It gives us a chance to exercise our appreciation.
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information to gain insight and knowledge. Head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game to make the connection between health and food.
And with an abundance of information, with an abundance of different technologies that are provided to us, I also find that there's some changes in the broader hunting public that may not be as good. So I'm seeing a lot of commercialized, shillism. People are shilling their products. It's all over the internet. It's, even myself, I'm wearing a QU shirt today. I mean, you can't avoid it.
You're an influencer.
I'm an influencer. And I'd rather see people emphasize the importance, the value of the hunting experience without as much commercialization. I understand why it's important. I understand that people need to buy gear. I understand people making money. I understand people establishing good businesses that have products that hunters need and use. But there just becomes a point where you need to focus on the experiential nature of hunting and all the benefits that it gives you, whether it's food, the excitement, the hunting experience, the closest to nature. All of that is far more important, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. Really high-quality gear can improve your comfort level and get people out when they wouldn't go out, into severe weather and things like that.
But do you really need
Not very
the
often.
latest pattern every single year?
I think what we're seeing, though, is an urban environment where we're besieged with commercialism and shopping as recreation, and that bleeds over and, quote, contaminates to some degree the hunting necessity and the planning and such. And it's pretty easy to get drawn into the thingism, the buyer thing, and planning. I use the analogy, there are a lot of people that love to have climbed mountains, but they hate climbing the mountain. Oh. There are a lot of people that love to have secured an animal, but they really don't enjoy the process. So things that make that easier sometimes will get them out.
Sure.
And I'll give them a little concession there, but don't let it replace the vital, ethical, emotionally significant events of being afield. When you're sitting there futzing around with your GPS or your cell phone or whatever, and you're missing out on the least weasel that's running past you, or the eagle that's flying over carrying a duck or whatever.
And don't get me wrong, I'm a sucker for all sorts of great gear, and I like it, especially if it's really useful gear. And I am tempted if company comes out with a brand new straight pull rifle that I'm like, oh my gosh. So it does have its appeal, but the appeal for me on a much broader level is to be out there in nature and enjoying
it should enhance
life.
your experience and not compete with your experience. I'll get that. Yeah.
We've covered a broad range of topics, and Alberta's changed a lot. Our population's doubled. We talk about wildlife management, just dealing with more people on the landscape makes it challenging. What's the future of hunting look like in Alberta?
Well, we don't have a crystal ball, but you know what? We don't have to reinvent the future because our population density wildlife dynamics have been played out in probably 20 of the 50 states beneath us and countries all over the world. We can pretty well chart where the conflicts are going to occur. We see urban wildlife. We see predator populations going up under protection and leaking into human habitation areas. We see competition for resources. These are all very old stories. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we do have to pay attention to the experience of others that have gone before and learn from that. And so some of it's a synthetic exercise of bringing together that information and making really good decisions to avoid the worst train wrecks. Matt, you live in this world.
Yeah, and also I think it's very important for hunters to understand and to accept that there's going to be changes. And, in Alberta, we quite often have the feeling that the good old days are now. And the access to game, the access to quality game, the opportunities for waterfowl hunting, the opportunities for moose hunting, elk hunting. There's more moose and elk in the prairies and the parkland than ever before in Alberta's history. So the hunting opportunity is there, but the landscape is changing. Access to the landscape, not necessarily competition between other hunters, but basically, how do you get on a piece of land that will give you that hunting opportunity and a quality hunting opportunity? We're seeing more and more ingress of acreages and semi-urban, semi-rural land use that is encroaching in larger private land areas, or far more industrial development that is happening in forested areas. So the landscape is certainly changing. Climate is changing. The species composition is changing. And we're becoming better and better hunters. So harvest rates are changing. So are we going to have the same opportunities today as we have tomorrow? Well, Lee's absolutely right. Let's look to the other jurisdictions that have had the same sort of dynamics that have occurred for hundreds of years before us. Populations get bigger, land gets subdivided, parcels become smaller and smaller. Alberta has benefited from a long time from being such a big place. But over time, it will get smaller and smaller because the human population will grow. So we know that there's going to be patterns of change occurring with respect to access, with respect to technology, with respect to draw wait times. All of these are going to be inevitable realities. I would never like us to get to where Pennsylvania is at right now, where you have 900,000 white-tailed deer hunters and a 3-week season and a stand on every single tree. I'm exaggerating, of course, but that is a style and a level of hunting that Alberta is far from. I hope we never get there because it's just very different, but it's become part of their culture. It's become who they are today. So it's a very difficult thing to predict where we're going to be, but we see patterns in other jurisdictions. These are going to become relatively obvious.
Well, I've lived in 3 states and 2 provinces, and I've seen various levels of privatization and hunter pressure and game populations. I will say Alberta has got the most liberal and the best population to area ratio of anywhere I've ever lived, accessible area. But the creeping change will be very unsettling to people, but it's got a long way to go before you're like any state in the United States. Even Montana is locked down now with privatization and stuff. And this rule that we have of not allowing private land leasing has been a godsend to the average hunter. I don't know how long that'll hold. There are commercial pressures to change that, and I understand why, but it's been a real godsend for access to the average Joe hunter on the street, and I really appreciate that.
So what I find to be very, very interesting is even when hunters complain about competition or access to lands, at the same time, we really encourage growing the number of hunters that we have provincially. Mm-hmm. We have very active programs that are recruiting hunters, recruiting youth. And why do we do that? Well, it's because the more hunters we have per capita, the more relevant that we can appear, certainly. But there's a new school of thought, and that school of thought is that why do we have to crowd the landscape? When you have more and more people, you tend to have more and more problems, more competition, less opportunities available to the number of hunters that you would have with a higher population. Then what do you do? And what would constitute relevance in a population? Is it a per capita representation, or is there a threshold? Is 120,000 hunters enough to be able to say, we're a significant part of this population, we vote, we spend a lot of money? I mean, is that 50,000? Is it 100,000? Is it 120,000? So do we really need to grow the number of hunters, or do we just need to make sure that we have adequate replacement? So are the number of youth that are entering hunting equaling the number of older folks that are basically either dying out or just too old to hunt? And those are two very divergent schools of thought, and there's quite a debate that's going on south of the border with respect to that. Do we have enough hunters, or do we need more?
It's a great question. You asked a bunch of leading hypotheticals there, and everybody will have their own opinion.
Just for you.
But the relevance of hunting in a population, if we let the numbers of hunters drift down below 2 or 3%, 1 or 2%, it becomes a cult-like status, like cockfighting or something like that, and it's easily snuffed out by moratorium votes. So to maintain relevance and permission, social license to continue this activity, you do need some critical amount. And I'm going to make up a number and say it's 7% of the population. I don't know if that's right. And also the social good that hunting does. I mean, I've heard people talk about violent gun crime. Most hunters are pretty well inoculated against that because they know that guns, what the repercussions of using a gun are. There are lots of responsibility and social goods that come out of having a hunting community. The love of the resource, having people that are passionately attached to the resource, that are willing to put their dollars towards it, their voice towards it, to fight for it, to bequeath their land to ACA, for example, when they pass on for the family ranch, to introduce people. These are alternatives to the digital era that you were just talking about. And those are, I think, social goods that make us a more humane, more natural, more livable society. So I think that it's worth fighting for, and it's actually worth government subsidizing. The non-hunters will benefit from having hunters in their midst. We do de facto wildlife damage control by monitoring populations in fringe areas. We are surveilling disease transmission. We speak out for the environment. It's a really valuable thing to have. In most primitive cultures, the meat procurement was held by less than 20% of the men.
Yes.
They were the hunters, and there were other guys that were diggers and tool makers and other things. I would love to see 20% of Alberta's population hold a hunting license. I don't know that we'll ever get there. But
well, even at our peak, when we had about 168,000 hunters in the late 80s, even then we were just over 10%.
Okay.
And that was Alberta's heyday.
Yeah. We look at waterfowl numbers. There used to be close to 90,000 waterfowl hunters in Alberta.
17,000.
Access, steel shot, a whole bunch of things. Yeah, we're down to 17,000. So it's sort of the reverse trend of what we're talking about. But
whitetail hunter numbers have gone up, haven't they? Or big game?
We're at whitetail hunters. The whitetail hunting license is the most popular hunting license. We sell about 140,000, I believe.
So give me you have a rough sketch of what the history of that is? Has that gone up, down?
Is maintained
Okay.
relatively constant.
Okay.
yeah, the passion around hunting is shown here at the table today. Mm-hmm. And I think that that leads itself to saying we have a pretty bright future still. The world is changing drastically and not always for the better.
Yeah.
But the history, the traditions of hunting are going to include new traditions, from our cooking styles to whatever new faces are bringing into the field.
Yeah.
So, to wrap it up and celebrate our 100th episode, do you have something profound to say about Alberta's hunting future?
I do. I will compliment the non-hunters. And hunters don't do this very often. Even those that are uncomfortable with hunting have gained a new acceptance, and I think this ties right back to the improved behavior and education and responsible use by hunters. I think that we're doing a lot better job than in the wild old days of whack them and stack them and shoot them up. The sensitivity around what gets posted on the internet, it's not as bad as it used to be. There's still problems there. The idea of not parading around with the deer over the hood of the car in town, the idea of not stopping after shooting hours and whacking a deer in somebody's wheat field illegally and dragging. Those things are rare now. The good behavior of hunters, and I think it may be related, hats off to the AHIA crowd, is that we're educating our hunters better. And there's a lot of social pressure now. Every person around carries this little computer in their pocket with a camera on it. And if you're doing something kind of out of line, you might be filmed and publicly humiliated. So I think we're more responsible, and I think the non-hunting public is more accepting than they have been in the past. The anti-hunting movement, I don't hear about it anymore. It must exist, But there was a time that there were battles, there were protests, there were people interfering with hunts and stuff. I just don't think that happens much anymore.
We still have a fairly robust anti-hunting movement. They are just very clever now. They're spending their money influencing political interests and economic interests rather than battling out in the media directly with hunters. But I'd like to go back to Brad's question, and I would like to point out that Alberta has absolutely a wonderful, wonderful group of hunters. About 120, 130,000 resident hunters in Alberta. And as Lee mentioned, they are knowledgeable. They most often do the right thing. They value the experiential nature of hunting. They value the food. They value the camaraderie with fellow hunters. They value landowners. They value nature. And they value the experience of being able to observe, enjoy, and participate directly in a natural ecological process in a way that is very, very difficult or very different from something like looking at the trees from within your vehicle and looking through the window, or even bird watching and doing things like that. You're taking responsibility for pursuing and harvesting wildlife, and you're treating it with respect as it lives and as it dies, and then you're utilizing that. Very few other outdoor recreational experiences are as that profound, and Albertans have embraced that. They made it socially relevant. They spend an incredible amount of money that contributes to the local economy, and on license sales, they're basically self-funding. They spend a tremendous amount of money on conservation-related projects, and for that, you should be very proud. This year, Bill 41, changes that we've made in the Wildlife Act, as well as the regulations that were announced on last Friday, the most changes that we've ever made in any regulation package, and they've come through this year. And it's because of the support and help of both hunters and non-hunters alike. And we really appreciate that. Even the hunters that participate directly, what they do affects many non-hunters in their family. People will enjoy the food. People will benefit from, the economic value, and we all should be quite thankful for that.
I told you he's a Polish philosopher. Hear that?
Well, Matt's in a very influential position
Yes.
to ensure that hunting does have a future.
I'm glad he's there. I'm really glad he's there.
When he philosophizes like that, I think it will put a smile on most people's faces.
That's what we're getting. Those ethos that are held, they've been cultured by his hunting experience to take him up to a politically influential and advisory level. That's the kind of leadership we really want in Alberta. Can I make you blush?
Write that down.
Can I make you blush?
Down. I'm already blushing.
Yeah.
Thank
Good.
you.
Anyways, I'd like to thank both you gents for coming in. We still haven't clarified whether hanging meat is beneficial or helps in the flavor or taste, but that's another episode again. Maybe it'll be Wild Game Ramblings 3.
Yes.
And maybe it'll be the 200th episode. So thanks for making Harvest Your Own successful, helping entertain, educate, and inform people, and give them food for thought.
Keep it up, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Another wonderful episode.
We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.